Have you seen these crazy skeuomorphic illustrations going viral on Twitter? Well, I've seen them, and I also seen some of the comments under these posts essentially saying that these must be so hard to develop. Well, in this video, I'm proving them wrong as I try to recreate this crazy interactive joystick in Framer without any coding, and our end result will not be a simple image, but a real website that others can also interact with. My name is Nandi. This is Framer University, and let's get started. Okay, so the joystick that I'm trying to recreate is coming from this post that I found on Twitter. You can see it is a really cool little interactive joystick, which is also skeuomorphic, so it looks kind of real. And yeah, it was posted by this person. I'm not going to attempt pronouncing this name, sorry. We also have a live preview, or like I don't even know, yeah, it's a live demo is the best way to put it. And yeah, we can just play with this here. You can see that when I click here, it's like also moving and it's interactive. And yeah, I'm going to show you how it's done in Framer and how you can do it in Framer. I have not done this before, so this will be my first try here live. So you're going to see as I'm like failing and then trying things multiple times. But yeah, I think it's going to be a cool video. Hopefully you're going to learn a thing or two from it. So let's jump into the Framer project and start creating it. You can also, by the way, follow along with me if you want to. You can just start a new project and just start making this little illustration with me. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is just look at this and yeah, just think about how we can recreate specific parts of it. So first of all, we have this hover effect. It's really subtle. You can see as I'm moving my cursor around, we have a little highlight effect that is following my cursor. So there's probably like a layer which is a little bit brighter, maybe white with like blur. And then it is following my cursor as I move it around. However, that layer is behind this dark circle that we have here. So that is going to be really important. And also, I think there will be some things that we're not going to be able to recreate exactly. For example, as you can see, as I hover, this right here is also getting animated a little bit. The gradient on it is changing slightly, but I'm not sure if I can recreate that. So I think that will just stay static. And then also here you can see the drop shadow is moving as well. Again, that's also really subtle, but yeah, that's again also something that I'm not gonna be able to recreate, I think. So yeah, that's it. But I think it's also like a really subtle thing that it's not that important, but we will definitely be able to recreate this interaction here. So that's gonna be easy, and that's it. I'm gonna just screenshot this and bring it into Framer so I can also see it there on my canvas. So let me just do a quick screenshot and put it into Framer, which I wasn't able to do. So let's try it again. Let me just drag and drop it here. And yeah, here we have the little joystick. I'm going to try resizing this and just determining like the size that we're going to have. I like when I create like these interactive things, I like picking a size that looks great on all devices. So you can see that this size is still great on phone as well. So I think we're going to go with this size here. Then I'm going to just draw a frame here right next to it, and then I'm going to make it a 400 by 400 frame, and I'm going to remove the fill color from this and also turn it into a layout. So now it's a stack. We can also rename it to container, and this on the left can be renamed to inspo. So this is the inspiration, and this is where we're actually building and recreating the little joystick. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just start drawing frames and then adding gradients and drop shadows to them. So probably the first thing that we're going to create is like the base. So we're going to have a frame here, and probably this part here on the bottom, this will also be like a separate frame. So let me just try getting the size of this frame by just drawing over this and putting it here. I think it's gonna be, yeah, you can see that it is actually in perspective. Let me just see if this is a square or not. So this here, if I measure this whole thing, this is not exactly a square, but roughly. But this part here is definitely not a square. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do 290 and 290. This is going to be kind of like a main wrapper frame for the whole joystick. So I'm gonna call this joystick. I'm gonna remove the fill color and turn the visible overflow on, or let's just say I'm gonna change the visible. Guys, I cannot talk, so I'm gonna change the overflow to visible. That's what I want to say. And yeah, then within I'll create this frame. So I'll just create it here again, make it exactly the same size, and just come in an X and paste it within this joystick that we've created. Here we can, I think, keep the absolute positioning. We don't really need the relative here. So I'm going to just pin it to the top, left and right. And you can see that this space here on the bottom is now roughly the same space that we have here, which is pretty good. So now I'll just start rounding the corners. So let's round the corners. Actually, we can also just grab it, put it here, and just try seeing what was that corner round value that we need. I think it's 60, so I'm going to paste it in here. 60 pixels, perfect. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a little linear gradient on the right panel. So linear, the top will be, well, I don't really know what is the true color here, because sometimes we're hovering over and the highlight is getting added here. So I'm going to try hovering here somewhere on the bottom so we get the true like color on the top. Hopefully I can do that. No, I cannot really do it. Well, then I'm going to just try to get something that looks like this. So it's probably going to be just slightly darker here on the top, and then the bottom will be this. And maybe also here, just slightly darker. Yeah, it looks great. One thing, one little like subtle detail that we also have to add is the noise, because you can see that here it's a little bit like pixelated, or not even pixelated, but yeah, it's just, you can see the noise there, which adds this texture to the element, which makes it more realistic. So I think we're going to add that a little bit later. Now let's just get the structure right. So we have this element here, let's call this top frame, and then I'm going to do a duplicate of this. So I'm going to just press Command and D, and then this is going to be called bottom frame. I'm going to set the top to z-index 1, and then the bottom will be z-index 0. So it's definitely below it. Now this bottom frame will be increased in height. So you can see that now it's down right here. It's a little bit larger. And now what we can do is we can add, you know, a different color to this one. So we get this kind of vibe here. I think what we can do here is a linear gradient from left to right. So here it's going to be a little bit brighter. Here it's going to be a little brighter as well. And here it's going to be darker. So linear, we're just going to flip it like this. And then on the left, it is going to have this color. We're going to just add a point here. Switch it to this black. Okay, so this point is getting added here. Let me just put it here. Then we're going to copy this color, this black, put another point here, paste that color in, and then get this color from the left and put it here on the right. So now on both sides, we have this highlight effect. It's a little bit more intense compared to what we have on the original. So I might try decreasing this just slightly to get something that is a little bit more accurate, and paste it into the other side as well. And yeah, now I think it's pretty good. I think we can fine tune this by adding some drop and inner shadows. So the way I'm gonna do that is by going to this top frame, for example, and you can see that there is just a slight, maybe like dark drop shadow here that's going on, and also it will be like a bright inner shadow here. But let's start with something a little bit darker on the drop shadow side. So I'm going to add shadow. It's going to be outside, so drop shadow. And then I'm going to do this, just increase the Y so it's a little bit more to the bottom. I cannot zoom in too much because then the drop shadows disappear, so that's something that you have to keep in mind when using Framer. And then the blur will be just increased a little bit. So now you can see it gets a little bit more realistic. And then we can play with the opacity to fine tune this. So I think 10% is subtle enough, and maybe we can also decrease the blur to 20. And yeah, I think now it looks a little bit more accurate, looks pretty good. Also, what I'm thinking about is maybe this here, this bottom frame is a little bit more rounded, because if you pay close attention to this area and then you try comparing it to this area here, it's not really the same. Here, this like curve is much more like continuous compared to this one. Here it goes a little bit further down to the bottom and then starts rounding. It should be starting the the rounding here. So I'm gonna try increasing the roundness on this one, and hopefully, yeah, we get something like this. But I'm actually not sure now if that's the solution. Let me see. Well, yeah, I think it looks a little bit more accurate, but not entirely sure. So let me move this here over. I'm going to get a little bit different color, like this, maybe blue. And I'm going to drop the opacity so I can be a little bit more accurate about this. So I'm going to make it larger a little bit. Also the height. And then just see if I increase this. Yeah, you can see that it's not really doing what I want it to do. Maybe if I change the height. No, it's not doing it. Okay, so maybe what, like, you see that this is the like difference here. Maybe they are just making it like smaller like this in terms of like a width. Yeah, we can actually try that. So this, maybe on the top and the right, left and right, we can add pins, but this essentially just means that it's getting a little bit smaller. So maybe 2 or 1, 1, just really subtle. So now, I think the bottom part is all right. Maybe here you can see that on this part, we have a little like light going on this bottom part. So it's not only dark here, but as we go to the bottom, it's getting a little bit more brighter. So the way we recreate that is by selecting the bottom frame, going to shadow, inner shadow, so not outside, because that will add shadow to the bottom, which we actually cannot even see, but now you can see it. If we do inside, we can change the Y, and now you can see that it is exactly where it should be. And we just have to set a different color. So it's gonna be white. We're gonna drop the opacity to maybe, I don't know, 5%, and then increase the blur so it gets a little bit more smoother. Also the Y can be tweaked, and the blur as well. I'm just trying to achieve that look we have on the original. I think here it's a little bit more like defined. It's not as smooth as here on our version. So I'm gonna try decreasing the blur. Maybe 6. And then play with the spread. Okay. Yeah, that looks great. And maybe what we can also do is we can layer these blur values. So maybe this can be like 6%. And then we can duplicate this and then make this one a little bit closer to the edge. So maybe -2. The blur can be lower, like 3 or something. And then you can see that it's just getting added to the edge, really close to the edge. And this can probably like be something a little bit different. in terms of opacity. So as you can see, we really added that highlight that runs like around the edge. But I think here it's now a little bit too intense. So I'm gonna change that to a lower value. But yeah, now I think it's looking pretty good. So yeah, I think we're on the right track. Perfect. So now I'm gonna focus on the top frame. So what we need to do here is we need to add some inner shadows. So you can see that on the top we have this, and not even on the top, I think it's all around, but on the top it's a little bit more defined. The highlight, actually, that's what I'm talking about. So again, it's gonna be an inner shadow. So on the right, I'm gonna go and select the inside option. It's gonna be white. And yeah, here we're just playing around with this value. Actually, what I'm thinking is that we could either start with like a smaller, like maybe 10% or 15, and then making it 0y, and then setting the blur to a larger value. So we just add this overall like highlight around the edges, and then we can duplicate this and then make a more defined version on the top. So by changing the y to a larger value and dropping the blur down a little bit, maybe to 4, we have this highlight on the top now. We can even like make this y smaller, and then we just have to tweak the opacity here to get what we have on the other one. So maybe 30. And I actually want to duplicate it again, make it maybe 1 and 2 blurs, so it's really not blurred at all actually. And just make this maybe 35. And yeah, as you can see, it looks pretty good in my opinion. So now we have created kind of the base of this whole thing, and we can now start adding some elements within, which is, you know, going to be this thing first of all. So I'm just thinking how we should do this, because yeah, I think I'm just gonna do like a simple circle. So I'm gonna draw a frame here and try to get the size, and then just paste it within the top frame, center it, and then set the radius to 50%. So now we have this here, but maybe I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller, like this. Actually, the thing that I was, thinking about is the fact that if we make it like this, a perfect circle, it's not gonna look like really 3D. The reason is because you can see that here it's a little bit distorted, it's a little bit pushed together, because we are not looking at it from the top, but a little bit from, we take a step back, and that's how we look at it, and that's why we see this part of the joystick, and also here we have some depth on this floating thing. And that's why the circle is also not a perfect circle, as you can see. Now I'm like drawing a perfect circle, and you can see how it gets a little bit bigger around this area here on the bottom. So I'm just thinking that maybe I'm gonna make it not a perfect circle, but I'm gonna like push it together a little bit, or just, exactly like draw over this and get the exact sizes and just work with that. I was just wondering if that's gonna cause us any like issues later on when adding the 3D like interactions, but hopefully not. Again, 50% radius, and then it already looks a little bit more realistic in terms of 3D, because this is not perfect circle, it's also a little bit pushed together, like really, I don't know, trying to recreate that perspective effect that we are looking for. Great, so now the color of this one will actually be fully dark. So let me just get the color. Perfect. Let me see if there's anything else here. Yeah, I think we can add the white drop shadow here. So on the bottom, we have a little highlight. So let's do that. I'm gonna go shadow outside. Let me change it to white. And now you can already see that it's getting added on the bottom. I can increase it, decrease it, just try to get the same vibe as on the original. So maybe 2, and for the blur we can use something like 3, and then the opacity will be maybe 20. For now 20 looks great, and yeah, that's gonna be it. And yeah, I think we can start going further within, and first of all rename this frame. This is, let's say this is the holder, inside holder. Why? Because I think that this is the frame that holds the button within, or the button inside here. So now we're gonna recreate that. So I'm gonna just copy the inside holder. So I'm gonna press Command and C, and then Command and V, so paste it in, and just rename it to button, and then put it within the inside holder. And then also change its color. Now just make it a little bit different like this, and remove the shadow. And then now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna deactivate all of these pins and just make it smaller a little bit. As I'm making it smaller, I'm trying to get the same space here. So let me just see. Yeah, I think we can make this a little bit even more smaller. Let me calculate it again, and yep, it looks pretty much equal now. Great. Let's also make sure that we press Option H and V so it's fully centered. But you can see that on top we have 11, right 11, left 12, and bottom 10, which is not really great. So let's have maybe 12 all around by setting these pins, and then I can deactivate all of them. And for some reason they are, okay, some of them are 13 for some reason. Sometimes Framer is acting a little bit weird, but yeah, I think we can say that it's roughly equal all around, but I think I might want to make it just slightly larger. Like this, and try centering it again, which I cannot really seem to do. Maybe I'm just hallucinating, but I still feel like that around the edges, it seems like there's just 1 pixel difference. So here on top we have 13, on the right we have 12. But I still feel like it's just a little bit too big of a difference. So I'm just trying to look if there's a way of making this equal all around. Maybe I can just set these pins, because I'm just wondering, or just worrying about setting these pins and then not being able to animate it the way I want to animate it. But hopefully that's not going to be the case. So I'm going to just set fixed pins so we keep those sizes equally, and yeah, it's gonna be nice like this. Perfect. So now the base color of this, well, I'm not sure what's gonna be the base color, because you can see that there is a bunch of like gradients going on. Here it's a little darker, then here it's brighter, and it's again starts getting brighter, but then here below this it's probably a little darker. So it's a little hard to know what is the base color, but maybe, just maybe this, because this is the largest area where it's a little bit brighter around here. So maybe that's where I'm gonna like pick a color and go with that. It's weird that like it's a little brownish, okay, this looks more like what it is right here. Maybe I can also remove the hue from this, or just start getting a little less saturation by moving this to the left. As you can see, on the left it's fully desaturated, and on the right it gets more and more saturated while keeping the same kind of gray tone. So yeah, we're gonna go with something like this, I think. Great. So now I can go and add the bright color all around. As you can see here, on the top it's a little more harsh, and on the bottom it seems like it has a little bit more like blur. Yeah, and here around here it starts getting more like harsh and not so blurred. So yeah, let's try doing that. I'm gonna add shadow, white. I'm gonna set it to inside, and then I'm gonna set it to the top first. I'm gonna set the blur to maybe 0. I'm not sure if it's Maybe I'm gonna just set 1 for the blur. It's gonna be 1 pixels, that's for sure. Okay, then I'm gonna duplicate the shadow. Now make the Y -2 maybe. Increase the blur. You can see on the bottom it's a little bit more blurred. Maybe this decrease the spread. Tweak the opacity. 25 maybe. And then I'll just set the spread to only -1 and then maybe set the opacity to 20. It looks great, I think. Yeah, it's fine, but it still looks pretty like bright. It's almost too bright. So what I'm gonna actually try doing is maybe adding a radial fill so the center is darker. It's hard getting a color, but I'm gonna try. So center is darker and the outside around here is brighter, and then here it's getting darker again. Well, yeah, it's not really. The problem with the radial gradient is that it's not gonna be as smooth as I want it to be. So I'm not sure if we are gonna actually use this. But let me try tweaking this a little more. Yeah, the problem is it's just not smooth enough. Let me just go to here and see how it like reacts. Okay, so I'm not gonna work with a radial gradient. I think I'm gonna go with a linear gradient, and on the top it's gonna be brighter, and here it will start getting darker. Maybe I'm gonna remove this and then just move it up here. Duplicate it here, set the same color, make it even brighter. Okay, maybe something like this. And then the radial gradient effect maybe will be created by adding the drop shadow, or sorry, the inner shadow. So we'll add the new shadow, it's gonna be inside, it's gonna be dark, and you can see how it's getting added on top, but I can increase the Y. Now it's there, and you can see how it starts looking as if it was created with the radial gradient. And I think this is the solution for our little issue. So you can see how I'm like trying different ways of recreating something that I see, because sometimes it's not that easy to see how something can be translated into like these linear radial gradients or like drop and inner shadows. But yeah, I think this looks pretty good. I just have to fine tune the blur value and the Y value here. And also then I also have to fine tune the brightness or the transparency, sorry, not the brightness. So yeah, I think it's gonna be like 50% maybe. Yeah, that looks great. And then I'm just wondering if we should add a little more around the edges overall. Maybe you can duplicate this and just add more with like Y set to 0. And if you increase this, you can see that it's just getting added overall to the like to the edge of the circle all around. So yeah, probably I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna just decrease this to maybe 20, so it's really subtle, but you know, it's there. Yeah, that looks great. I think that is cool. And then what we'll do as well is just add that shadow that this element casts, but I think we're gonna add it a little bit later, maybe as a drop shadow on this element itself. Now what I'm thinking is that we would need icons for the top left and right and bottom arrows. So I think we're gonna just try, I don't know, what should I do? Maybe I'm gonna just try drawing them here. So I'm gonna create a little frame, maybe just do it here over this thing, and then we can, you know, paste it onto our version. Maybe it's gonna be 36. This is gonna be the holder of our icon, so I'm gonna call it icon, and then I'm gonna draw 2 frames. It's gonna be maybe 2 for the width. I'm gonna rotate it slightly, and it's gonna be white, fully white. We're gonna be able to drop the opacity a little bit later, then duplicate it with option, and then dragging it, and then I think that's it. Now we just have to make sure that this is centered, which is a little bit hard to do, but yeah, now it's perfectly centered. So cool. Okay, so I can, use this on the top. I'll be able to use it on the bottom, but we need a version that looks like this, so double arrows. So I'm gonna try also doing that by by moving this here and then just dragging and duplicating. Yeah, that looks great. Cool. So let's start with this one. I'm gonna copy, paste within the button. I'm gonna center it Option H and then move it to the top with pin set to maybe 10 on the top. But we can tweak this by measuring here, and I think it is, yeah, it can be a little bit more to the bottom, maybe 12. Then I'm going to duplicate it, set the bottom pin to 12, and then rotate it around. Now we have the bottom arrow as well, and maybe let's just see if, yeah, it should be a little bit more to the bottom because of the perspective that we talked about previously. So we're trying to imitate the perspective, and for that we have to make it, move it a little bit more to the bottom. Okay, that's great. And now let's also copy this one here, this icon, put it here, Option H and V to center it, and then delete this one. Measure if the center is the same. No, so we have to move this a little bit more to the bottom. Let's measure the center now. I think it's roughly okay. Yeah, and then let's move it to the right. I'm hoping that it's not changing. Yeah, okay, it's still there. Perfect. Let's also measure this distance. So you can see that I'm measuring all of the distances because I want to make sure that it's, it's perfectly recreated. If we don't get these right, then it will just feel different. So yeah, that's why I'm like really careful about this. Now that's great, and I can duplicate this, move it to the other side. Let me see what was the pin here. Let's activate the right one. It's 12. So on the left one, it's probably going to be the same 12 distance. But just to double check, I'm going to also measure it here and then here as well. Actually, it's not, but I think that's a mistake because these should be the same size. Oh wait, what? This is the same as this. Okay, something is not okay. Is the size of the icon? Oh yeah, the size of the icon seems to be a little bit larger, first of all. So I think I have to decrease the size. There's a new feature in Framer which is scale, so I'm going to use that now. I'm going to select the icon, press K on my keyboard, and just scale it down a little bit. So I'm going to maybe 0.75 or just 0.9. Just slightly smaller. Now you can see that these don't line up as perfectly as they used to. So maybe I don't want to do that. I don't know what is happening here right now. Maybe I'm going to move them like this. The point is that this distance should be the same as here, and it is. So I think now it might be okay. Great. So what I'm also thinking about is that these icons should be also distorted slightly, just like the circle is pushed together a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe add like a rotation to all of these. So I'm going to select all of them. Maybe also set their opacity to a little bit lower to try to get like the same vibe, which is a little bit hard just by looking at this and trying to set the same opacity, but maybe like 0.3. And then rotation 3D and along the X, which is not true for all of them because they are slightly rotated. Oopsie. So I think what I'm gonna do is select this one, set the X rotation, not the X rotation, the Y in this case, a little bit larger, maybe minus 15. We're gonna do that here as well. And then this will be minus 15 along the X. This will be just minus 5 maybe. So they are distorted just slightly. Hopefully it's a little bit more realistic this way. So as you can see, we are getting closer to the final result. I think now what we have to do is we have to add this little element here. So what I'm thinking about is, can we do this with a single layer? Can we just draw a frame and add all these highlights, this depth and everything with a single layer? Let's see. I don't actually know. So I'm going to come here, or maybe here, and just try again drawing over this to get the same size. Paste it here, center it. I think it's centered. Let me also check. Yeah, it is. Yeah, perfect. Set the radius to 50% and then get a color. Well, the color, I don't know what the color will be. As you can see, it's changing color, but maybe, let me try screenshotting this, putting it in, and then grabbing that color from here, the center. Okay, I think we're gonna use that. And then I'm gonna also add a linear gradient. On the top, it's gonna be a little darker. And on the bottom, it's gonna be a little brighter. I think that's gonna be the base color. And then everything else will be added right now. So we're gonna add, first of all, a shadow, or actually it's gonna be a border, because we can see a well-defined thing here that can be a border. I'm just wondering, should it be a border or not? If it's a border, then it's not gonna be blurred, and it cannot be blurred. And I'm just wondering if this is unblurred or... But no, I think we need that little blur. So instead of using a border, we use inside shadow with 0x, 0y, and one blur just to add the slight blur, and then I increase the spread. So you can see that this essentially adds like a little border. Color will be grabbed from here. And yeah, this looks much better because we have that really subtle glow. Not glow, sorry, blur. Because that's what we need. Great. Now let's add another inside shadow. Increase the Y. It's gonna be a little dark thing here on the top. Get the color, decrease it slightly, and then add the blur. Okay, that's great. I'm gonna duplicate it because we need something that is not as much to the bottom, it's a little bit more to the top, so maybe 10 with lower blur, but something that is a little bit darker. So you can see how we add that little darker color around the top, but it should be a little bit more blurred. I think that's great. I think that's great. And then we need the highlight around the bottom, so we're gonna add inside shadow again. We're gonna get the color, and then Y will be adjusted. This, perfect. And also we can move this to the top, so it's gonna be above everything. Maybe not above everything, but as like the second one after the first like border that we added. And then just tweak the Y, maybe like this. Okay, yeah, that looks great. What I'm also seeing is a little different color here. So I'm gonna duplicate this one, add that slightly different shade, and then add that there. Yeah, I think that's it. I think this one here on the left though is a little, or the original itself, it's a little darker on this specific color. Or actually I don't know, because it seems like it's brighter but also maybe more saturated, so I'm gonna try doing that. And then also we need the depth. So that's going to be another shadow. You can see how much we can do with these shadow layers. It's crazy. So it's going to be outside. We're going to get this exact same color here, and it's not going to be blurred. We're just going to simply move it down a little bit. You can see now it has depth. Pretty cool. We just have to define the level of depth with this Y value. I think it's going to be, yeah, 5 is good. Now we have a little bit more to do here with this element because it needs to glow around the top. You can see it here, glow, and then a little drop shadow on it. So select this frame, which can be renamed to like glow, like orange, glow, whatever, I don't know. And then add the shadow outside. First, let's do the like the drop shadow. So I think it's gonna be a little bit less blur. Yeah, I think that's it. What I'm wondering about is why is this not centered? I centered it really quickly. Okay, no, it's good. I don't know when it got uncentered. But okay, now we have the drop shadow. Now we also can add a duplicate of this, move it to the top. It's gonna be on, you know, above all of these shadows because it's like the glow, which has probably like something like this of a color, and it's glowing to the top. You can see on the left, on the original, it's a little darker. Or yeah, something like this, a little more saturated. Yeah, maybe this. Yeah, something like this. And then we can, you know, put this somewhere, maybe -12. And then we can also increase or decrease the blur to get the effect that we need. Perfect. Now we have this static thing here, but we kind of want to make it responsive and, you know, interactive. Before doing that, let me just do one more thing though. I just want to measure the distance here. And then here. As you can see on the bottom, it's a little bit more. Here, here. Yeah, I think it's gonna be okay. I just feel like that on our version on the right, this like thing is a little bit more to the bottom. I just kind of want to move it up by 1 or 2 pixels. Yeah, it feels a little bit better. Yeah, so we have a bunch of different, or not a bunch of, just 2 interactive parts of this. First is the highlight effect, and then the second is the click effect. So actually for the click, we need an extra preparation to be able to animate this in like 3D like this, because we have to position this element here as a, we already have to put it in 3D space with like depth. We have to move it closer to us. So when we rotate this like part of the button, it actually moves like this nicely. So we have to prepare for that. And then before I jump into the interactivity, let me just do one extra thing that I forgot. Add the noise, because we have this, it's a little too clean, a little too unrealistic. So add that little noise here. So I'm going to draw a frame here, Command and X, paste it within the joystick, set it to absolute, and pin it to all sides with 0 pins. 0 pins, as I said. I can set the Z index to something larger, so it's over everything. And I can then set the radius so it covers the thing exactly. Here on the top, we need a little less, as you can see. So 70 on the bottom and then 60 on the top. And then, okay, so we will set this index to 5 and then pointer events to none, so it will not prevent us from interacting with the layers below it. It's going to be important for the future. Now this frame will be renamed to noise. The way we generate the noise is I'm going to set the opacity to 1, go to image, type set to tile, and then select this first option. As you can see, this pretty much looks like a noise. So I can start tweaking the scale here, but more importantly, I can decrease the opacity. And also what I'm thinking is that we could add a blending mode. So blending, and I'm going to try setting it to maybe screen. That's not really good. Overlay. That might be what I'm looking for. Yeah. So now if I start, increasing the opacity, you see it gets more and more of this noise. And if I change the scale here, the noise gets a little more detailed or like smaller or bigger. So what we need here is, well, I don't really know. Maybe we're going to go with like 80. And then the opacity should be really, really subtle. So it's going to be maybe like 0.1. And then I'm also thinking about changing the scale here. Yeah, maybe 90. Yeah. So now you can see that, hopefully you can see I'm recording at 4K. Hopefully these details actually are visible for you as well. But yeah, this little touch gives it some texture, and it just feels better. Great. And that's not that great that I was editing the tablet. I just noticed it. I don't know when did I start editing the tablet. Usually the problem with editing the tablet is that I'm making overrides here, and so things are not edited here as like a change. But I'm not sure when did I do that, or when did I start editing the tablet here. Let me just do a couple of undos. But yeah, I think it should be fine. We are here on the desktop. Again, 0.1 opacity and 90 for the scale. Okay, perfect. So now we can actually prepare for the interactivity on the button within. So I'm going to set the noise to, I'm going to actually lock it. So Command and L, now it's locked. So when I click here, I'm not going to accidentally click it or select it. And I can freely select elements within. So again, what I need to do is I need to set the orange glow to transform depth and make it larger. Now, I don't really see the effect of this. The reason why that is happening is because this is not within a 3D space. So I have to set the joystick itself to transform perspective, and then I have to add what is that called? Preserve 3D. Now, we still cannot see it because this element here, the orange glow, is nested deeply within. And in order to preserve this 3D space along these different layers, we have to add the Preserve 3D property to multiple parent frames. So this is the main parent frame joystick. It's set to perspective and Preserve 3D. The 3D setup is made on this layer, but then the top frame is another parent frame of the orange glow that I have to set to Preserve 3D. The inside holder is another one that I have to set to Preserve 3D, and the last one I have to set to Preserve 3D is the button. And now you're gonna see, boom. This was a little bit painful as it started not looking that great. But yeah, I already know why these icons are not visible fully. I'm gonna show you in a minute. But yeah, in theory now, if I increase or decrease this depth, it should be increasing in size. I don't know why that is not really happening though. Well, that is something I have never encountered. I actually don't know why is this happening. Well, okay, let me try rotating this button in 3D. Actually, you can see that the depth is working, like it's moving like that. The only question I have is why is it not getting larger? Because when we set a depth to a larger value, this element should be getting bigger as it's coming closer to us. That's weird. Maybe you have to set perspective here as well. We shouldn't. It should work without setting perspective here, but it seems like we have to do that now. So I'm going to set perspective on the bottom frame, and then now you're going to see that it's working nicely. And I just have to set the orange glow to maybe only 20 depth, and then just set the button to a rotation along the Y, and you're gonna see how it's like nicely rotating and moving this orange glow layer. We have a couple of issues that we're gonna fix a little bit later, but let's just fine tune the depth value that we need. And yeah, you know, this is going to be the interaction. It's like moving to the left, right, as I'm clicking them, clicking the arrows. So yeah, this will be good. We have to fix two things. First of all, the fact that these arrows are getting cut off because they are like going inside of, or I don't know how to put it, but basically this is the layer. On top of that we have an icon, and now the icon is rotated. You remember how we rotated it, and now a part of the icon is going below the layer. So boom, a specific part of the icon is below the layer, and that's why we cannot see it. And it wasn't a problem up until now because we didn't have a 3D setup, a 3D space setup, but now we have it. So I'm gonna just zero out these these rotations, and then add back only the rotations that we need, and then we're not really gonna like distort these arrows. It was either way, you know, a really subtle change that I wanted to add, but it's gonna be, I think, fine without that. Great. Now that we made or added the depth to the orange glow, you can see how we are adding the depth and making by that making the orange glow bigger. So I will just make it smaller just to counter that depth effect, so we really have the size that we wanted to have originally. So something like this. Perfect. Now the last thing is that how do we make sure that when we will eventually start rotating it like this, it's not looking bad? Well, that's a great question. That's a really great question. I'm not entirely sure. Somehow we could maybe elevate the button frame with depth, but you can see that if I do that, the problem with that is that it's gonna get bigger. I'm wondering if we can just hack the system and scale it back down a little bit. We actually can. Let's try seeing what is the level of like movement that we have there when I'm like rotating. That's what I want to see. It's actually no more than like 25. So then that shouldn't be bigger than 46. And then the scale is not 0.9 but 0.95, 6. I'm just trying different values here. Actually, do we need this scale? Yeah, we need it. I think maybe this is, yeah, I think this is what we need. So when we rotate, it will be moving like this. Yeah, I think that is looking great. Yeah. So we just elevated it with depth. So it was like this on the surface. So when it was, you know, rotating, it was going under the surface. Now we have elevated it, so it's 50 pixels above the surface, because we set, sorry, not 50, it's actually 46, the depth. So we elevated it, moved it above the surface, and then now if I change the rotation, it's no longer going below the surface. Perfect. So now we are prepared to do the interactions. So for that, I'm gonna actually just tell you one more thing. When we are rotating these, we're not only gonna rotate but also change these shadows. You can see how this part gets a little darker and this part gets brighter as I click it. So we'll have to add those changes. And for that, I think what I have to do is I have to prepare those shadow layers that will be used for you know, making these changes when I click these buttons. So the shadow that I'm going to use to add brightness on the left, I have to already create that, as well as the shadow layer that will be used for adding shadow on the right side. So I'm going to just add those shadow layers here on the button, and they're not really going to do anything. They're going to be the last, or maybe they're going to be the first, or should they be the first? I think, yeah. this should be the first on top. It's gonna be 0, 0. I'm gonna actually try, it's gonna be inside, sorry. And then the blur will be lower. You can see that's how it's gonna be added on the left, for example, when I click here. But I'll fine tune the opacity, maybe 50. And then blur, well, the blur should maybe be 15. So that's how it's gonna be moved in there like this. But now it's gonna be waiting on 0x, and then the blur will also be 0, so it's fully invisible. If I set the blur to larger value, it slightly shows up. I'm gonna set it to 0. And then I'm gonna duplicate this, and I'm gonna play around with the brightness as well. So how am I gonna add the brightness? I'm gonna also increase the X here, and then the blur. But it's not gonna be so strong, so I have to fine tune that as well. Let's see on the left what the level of brightness is on that. I think it's around 10, or maybe a little bit larger, maybe 12. Yeah, I think that's it. The blur, well, I don't know what's gonna be the final blur, but for now, let's set both to 0 and only add these when we actually go to this variant. So yeah, now we did the preparation for that type of interactivity. Before I do that though, I might want to actually add the highlight that follows my cursor, because that is a little bit easier to do and we don't need a component for it. So I think it makes sense to do it right now here on the canvas. I can actually put this here to the side because we no longer need it. We have actually recreated it and it's here on my page. And so now I can just make a frame here, make it white, 50% for the radius, set the brightness to a lower value and also set the blur. And also maybe it can be a radial gradient. In the center it's white, and on the outside it's 0%, and then also blur it slightly, and then we're gonna get this smooth like highlight. I can copy this, or actually rename it to highlight, and then copy and paste it, or sorry, Command X, and then paste it within the top frame. Now it is right here. I don't know if it's over the inside holder or not. I'm gonna set the inside holder to Z index 2, and then the highlight will be Z index 1. So now if I increase this, you can see it's right there. It's centered, so you cannot really see it properly. Also, where it is? I'm again looking at the tablet version for some reason. I don't know when I get jumped to that version, but yeah. So now it's right here. You can see that it's overflowing, which is not what I want. So let's try setting top frame to overflow hidden. Let's check if that breaks anything. It seems like it is not. So yeah, should be fine. And then yeah, this highlight will be just moved around like this to add the highlight effect. We just have to fine tune the opacity. I actually want to guess something that is a little bit more like brighter compared to what we had on the original, because I think it was a little bit too subtle, almost not even visible. So maybe it's gonna be like 0.6. And then point errors will be none again on this one as well, just to make sure it's not causing any issues. And then the highlight by default is going to be centered. But how do we move it in accordance with the cursor? Well, first of all, let me just deactivate all these pins so it's not pinned to any sides. So how do we make it follow the cursor? Well, we can go to the Framer University website, framer.university, and search for follow cursor component. Framer University, by the way, is a great website, I think. Sorry guys, I made it, so of course I want to say it's great, but yeah, it has a bunch of cool components, just like this cursor follow. By the way, this one also just got released not so long ago, which is, I think, a pretty cool component. You might want to check it out as well. So now that I have the component on my clipboard, I can paste it within the highlight, Command V, and it's not really pasted within the highlights, it's within the orange glow. So let's put it within the highlight. And on the right, I can change these properties. So it's going to be enabled. We add a little smoothing so it's not exactly on my cursor. It follows the cursor with a little delay. Let's just put it that way. And then the transition can stay like that. So as you can see, now we have this highlight. I think it's too strong, so I wanted to make it, stronger, but or maybe I want to make it a little bit less like harsh, so 0.3 opacity, and maybe a little bit bigger. So let's take a look at this now. Yes, that looks great. I might want to increase the blur and also might want to decrease the opacity and might want to make it even bigger. Let's see now. Yeah, I think this looks great now. Also, we can see how it looks if we put it over the inside folder. So let's set the z-index to a larger value, and you can see that that's just not really what we need. So that's why I said right from the start that it is going to be behind that dark like center part, this button, and just will be visible on this front or top frame that we created here. But yeah, perfect. Now we have this. Great, works nicely. Okay, cool. So now let's turn this into a component and start finalizing those interactions. Let me think. So yeah, okay, we have these icons here. Now there is a little thing that we have to think about, which is the fact that this joystick now has the perspective and the preserve 3D. In order to keep those properties there, we have to turn the container into a component and not the joystick. If we turn the joystick into a component, let me do that, you'll see that those properties will be now lost on the right panel, because the top level variant in a component cannot have those transforms. So I'm going to undo this and then just make this container the same size as the joystick by setting it to fit width and fit height. And then this container will be actually called joystick, and then the joystick itself maybe will be called content. And now I can turn the joystick itself again to a component. But let me just set the overflow to visible on this one just to make sure there's no issues with that. Okay, perfect. So joystick selected, right click, create component or option command K, and there we go. So now on this component canvas, we can define the default variant, which is already here. And then we can have 4 variants, one that defines the top, and then another that defines the left, right, and bottom. So one will be created here called up. Here, I changed the like the rotation along the X to 25. You can see how cool that it has this 3D effect because we moved the button to the top. We elevated it with the depth, sorry, not the button but the orange color, and it moves as I'm rotating this button in 3D. If this was 0 depth, it wouldn't really be moving like that. You see I'm changing this and it's still in the surface with the button. So we really need that, elevation with depth. So let me just undo that so we have that. So yeah, it's gonna be 25, so 25 here. And now, as you remember, we created those helper like shadow layers on the button on the top. Here, these 2 are the ones that we need. And let me just take a look at what happens if I click here. The top gets darker and the bottom gets brighter. So let's do that. The dark one gets to the top, so Y will be changed to, well, I don't know how much. Yeah, maybe 20. And then the blur gets to, the blur is not too strong, to be honest. Maybe it's like 10. Great. And then we will just memorize these values. We're gonna always use 20, either minus or plus, and either on the X or Y, and then 10 for the blur, just to keep it consistent. So the highlight will be 10, minus 20, and then 10 here. So basically that's it. Now, if I add an interaction connecting from this icon, I can just connect here. It's going to be a click interaction. If I click the icon, I go there. Perfect. Now what happens here is that I click it and then it goes back to the default automatically. How do we do that? Well, we just come here to the app and then we connect back from here to the default. And this is going to happen on appear. So as soon as we show this app variant so it appears on the screen, it will immediately go back after waiting a little time, so maybe 0.2. We can also make sure that it plays when it's off screen. Let's see how that works. Boom. Perfect. That's exactly what we need. Maybe we can tweak the transition. So transition here can be maybe 0.1 bounce, and it can be a little bit longer, 0.6 for the time. And yeah, it's much smoother now. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, actually, I think that I was a little bit too zoomed in here, and I feel like now looking at this one, that the blur values could also be larger. So button. So this could be like, I don't know, 20 maybe as well. Then here 20. Let's see. Yeah, I feel like that's better. Yeah, I feel like that's cool. And now we just have to do this on all sides, essentially. So let's do that really quickly. So I'm gonna do another variant. I'm gonna just select the primary, click here, new variant. Now you'll see that because we added something on the default primary, an interaction from this layout arrow, it's getting added everywhere. So now it's also added here. So we have to remove it here. Okay. This is going to be down, and here we're going to rotate the button along the X -25. Actually, let me see. Okay. Maybe here I don't want to rotate as much, or maybe -25. Let's take a look at -25 because that's what we used on the app as well. And then what else? Yeah, we also need to add the shadows. So it's gonna be bright on the top, so 20, then dark on the bottom, so -20 and 20. Okay, let's see what happens if I add the interaction. So from here, we're gonna connect here, click. By the way I did that is by selecting it and pressing L on my keyboard. That's how I can connect without dragging here. It's a little bit quicker. Again, it's added here, so I'm gonna also remove it from here, and then go back on up here, just like how we did it on the other one. As you can see, this appear effect was also added to the app. So when we click this and go to the bottom, we move back really quickly. So we have up, down, and all we need now is left and right. So let's do that as well. Default primary is clicked, new variant is created, interactions are removed that we don't need on this specific element or variant. Left, and then button will be rotated -25. Then we're gonna add the shadow here, 20, blur 20, and then -20 along the X and blur 20. So we added again shadow and highlight. We're gonna go here when we click the left icon, so pressing L, connecting here, and then connecting back from here to the primary on appear, 0.2 delay, and play off screen. Now again, this should be removed from all variants, this left interaction. Also test it, up, down, and left works great. And then we just need the last one, which is right. We're gonna rotate it on the right, 25, and I think we need to remove this, and this. And yeah, now we just need to add the shadow and highlight. Highlight will be on the left, so 20 along the X and 20 on the blur. And then the other one will be -20 and 20 on the blur. Perfect. Add the last interaction, click the icon, press L, connect to right, on click, and then from right we go back to default on appear, point to delay, play off screen, and then let's just remove this interaction, this right interaction from all of these. Pretty good. I think we're ready, guys. So let's see. We have the interaction. It's following my cursor, the highlight. I can click the top. It goes there. Left, bottom, right. Skeuomorphic illustration in Framer, developed as a real website. Guys, keep in mind, this is a real website. If I go on the top right and publish it, you're gonna see I can click this link that was automatically generated, but I can upload my own custom domain. I don't really want to print this, to be honest. So here it is. It's a live website, as you can see. I can send this to anyone, and this is interactive. I can click this, it works, and you can see that this here's the code of the website. It's like real. These are real elements with like shadows and fill colors and everything. It's all real. So when I see comments that, hey, it's like so hard to develop, man, it's not hard. You just draw rectangles, add drop shadows and fill colors, and you can do this in no code really easily. Yeah, I really do hope that this little video was actually helpful and you learned something from it. It was actually a pretty fun little exercise for me as well, to recreate it as close to the original as possible. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. Make sure to comment if you have any questions, or if you just want to say something to me. Yeah, and also check out Framer University because I have a bunch of cool components as you saw in the video. So yeah, that's it, guys. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, and I'm going to see you in the next one.